communicate in the chat if you feel more comfortable doing that, but this is being recorded. You can click turn on captions in the right-hand corner to make it easier to follow the discussion, especially sometimes I know I can talk kind of fast. I think both of us can talk kind of fast, especially here's a lot of material. If you get disconnected, just log out and log back in. Surprisingly enough, that seems to fix most problems, okay? So here we go, off the rip, right? Why do our professors even give us tests? You know, they have to assess you at some point, right? Oftentimes, I was talking to a student the other day and she missed a question, but I can guarantee she will never forget the answer. So, you know, there's two parts of assessing you and scoring points. And then there's a point at which asking you to do that, that's forcing you to learn. There are some logistical mechanics that have to occur in order for you to commit things to long-term memory and retain them. And having to do it like performing under duress and things like that has a lot to do with that. So there's also a learning component and not just assessment, okay? The point of this workshop is to help you learn how to better prepare and develop strategies. We're coaches. I feel like that's, you know, the best way to describe what I do beyond anything else. I'm here to help you score points, okay? We don't get any grind points. You get assessed mostly by these tests, you know, papers and things like that. I was fortunate to write a lot of papers. At this level, you guys see a lot of tests. So let's get started. Part one, you see this slide. This is the most time-consuming phase in which review, study, and self-test. I don't have a whole lot of real exciting information for you guys, but hopefully what I am going to tell you will give you some context into what's going on. So here's our first poll question. How many days before a test do you start preparing? You can answer in the chat. What do you guys think? A week? 3 days?
Yeah. 7, 1 day. We have a good mix of answers here. 3 days.
Yeah, we do. Coming 7. From everybody.
Yep.
Okay, so I got good news and bad. Well, straight up, you should start preparing the day you get your syllabus, gang. Real talk. And everybody's like, well, but it's the truth, right? Because that is what you are eventually there is to get a credential. And to get that credential, you need to score on this test. So the reality is you should start preparing. Your mind should be pointed towards the test from the moment you get your syllabus. All these other assignments in between, sure, they're important, but they're definitely preparing you, pointing you towards the test. Check your syllabus and see how much all that stuff is worth. Okay, you know, there are more than a couple of times where your tests are more than 50 or 75% of your grade. I had one course that only had 2 tests. It had a midterm and a final, and that was it. Turns out I love that, actually. So here we go, talk about how things should go, all right? And I know everybody's like, man, Joe, it's almost over. And I'm like, I know. But I think, once again, that sometimes like having this kind of context can help you understand where you're at and where you're going, okay? So very quickly, I'm gonna try to get through this stuff and get more towards the day of testing stuff or the week of. But create a semester calendar, okay? You see on this slide, there are a couple of different things. Please look over this slide. You see time management, the 3-hour rule. If anybody is confused about the 3-hour rule, please speak up or answer in the chat so we can touch on that, because it is a big deal and it may have some effect on you moving forward. Your optimal study time, location. Guys, by now we've all been at home. You know, this is one thing that like it can be a downside, or it can be you know, a challenge, but it can also be in your favor, okay? Because while location, we can't travel around like we used to, right? But the thing is that you now have control over your test environment, okay? You're now going to test in the same environment where you are studying, where before you had to travel, now you don't. So that is in your favor, okay? So if you haven't figured out, you know, how to clear yourself a workspace and things like that, you can reach out and talk to us. If you have any questions, once again, this is a small group. Okay, so we have time to go into some of those details about trying to set up your workspace and things like that.
Hey, Joe, we have a question about the 3-hour rule. So if you wouldn't mind
Great.
taking a second to cover that for us.
All right, isn't that next slide? Yeah, okay, good. So I'll go back to the last slide again, but this one, I think the 3-hour rule is always a great segue, okay? The 3-hour rule, you guys should have covered it in EDUC. You probably heard it at some point or another, but a lot of times I don't think it really registers until you see it laid out, which is what this is, okay? The 3-hour rule states that for it's every hour in class, you owe 3 hours outside. It just so happens that during 16 weeks, you're in class for 3 hours and it's a 3 credit hour class. So it's 3 times 3 is 9, if that makes sense. In the summer, it's different when it's condensed because you're in class more. But during 16 weeks, you're in class for 3 hours. During the semester, it's a 3 credit course. And then so you owe 9 hours of study outside of class per week. So you owe 9 hours of study per week outside of class for every 3-hour, 16-week course, okay? And that's what the 3-hour rule means, 2 to 3 hours, okay? 2 to 3 hours is important because if you look at this dude, your typical full-time student's got 4 classes. This dude owes 36 hours of study, but check it. And this is why when you see it laid out, this dude is going from 8 to 5. That's a work day. There's a reason why our work days are like that. Some jobs just get downright dangerous after lunch because it becomes harder to pay attention. So it's like you can keep on working if you want to, but at this point, that's a lot of school, realistically, okay? And if he keeps on going into the night, which is like I like to call I read but don't remember land, he's probably going to have a hard time remembering what he's doing, regardless of the fact that he's been doing it all day. From the moment you open your eyes in the morning, you start burning calories and you start making decisions, okay? So even though it seems like you're just coasting, by noon, you're already starting to wane. That's why you got to break and eat. All right. So to keep on moving into this thing, like I'm sure some people are like, man, I wish I would have known this when, but you know it now. This is about what you guys should look like. All right. Do not work on one thing until it is done. Okay. It's more like Thanksgiving just passed. It's more like making a big meal. Okay. You should start everything. That's why Friday, I think, is the easiest day to see it, where you see this gentleman is going to start his study time by working on every single one. But that happens all throughout here. He's working on everything every day. If you check every single color, all 4 colors are represented on every day. So that means he's working on everything every day. So now he's got all of his stuff started, and he's going to eat lunch. And now you're probably asking yourself, well, what is this black section, Joe? This black section is what is our hours that we know that this guy needs to study because the data says he's got to keep going, but it's really hard to tell him what to do, which is one of the other benefits of starting your day like that, is that you can see all 4 classes, you know what's going to happen in all 4 classes moving forward, because in the end, this guy's only got like 27 hours of study on here going from 8 to 5, okay? He's got to figure out how to allocate his resources, right? Some weeks he's going to have a test. Some weeks he's going to have a paper. Some weeks he's going to have 2 tests. So every week is not the same. And that's what all of this black stuff is about. Okay. Do you guys have any questions? Because quiet is kept. This is our most used resource. It's really not very glamorous, but the truth of the matter is it's kind of like, you know, the linchpin to this whole thing. So, I mean, a lot of times we go through this, and even at this late juncture, people are like, oh, no wonder. Oh, no wonder. Or people will be like, I'm burning out. And a lot of times it's because they're doing all of their math on one day. Okay. If you guys are interested in getting some more information, you can always make an appointment. You know, pop up something in the chat. Like I said, this is a small group. We have time to get into some of these details. Okay. And then here's one. Oh, raise the hand. Yes. You have a question? I like this hand raising, but what's your question though? Well, I'm gonna go forward. If you have a question, type it in the chat.
Was that me or I can't tell who raised that?
I don't know. Somebody's hand popped up twice, but that's okay. Okay, so here's another piece, right? And once again, this is another idea that people are like, oh, I wish, and yeah, but once again, it can give you some context into what's happening, and it may come into use here in these last couple of weeks. So this is basically the college study schedule, college study cycle. All right. I think the easiest way to get started is by comparing it to the high school cycle, which is the way most of us kind of understand classes, that we go there and we say, please, Mom, tell us what we're going to learn today, Mom. And she says, wait, hold on. Before we give you anything new, let's make sure you understand what we did last, or at least yesterday, or whatever. Take out your homework. Let's go over it. Any questions? No. And then you go over the new stuff, right? Well, in college, the first thing is typically you're only going to class 2 days a week. All right. So that's the very first thing that's happening here. Oftentimes people think, oh, I only got class on 2 days. That's what I thought. No, you don't. You got class every day. It's just you only have lecture on 2 days. You are responsible for the rest of these days. All right. So that's the very beginning of this thing, is that you should already know, using your syllabus is the most important thing that your professor will give you. You should already know what we are going to lecture on for the next class period. Okay. If I was a professor and you came to my class, I'd say, any questions? Everybody go, nah. And I'd be like, all right, well, let's go home. Play PlayStation. I got Diablo to play. And everybody be like, yo, no, you got to teach us. And I'd be like, well, you don't have no questions. Questions over what? Over the syllabus, over the reading, okay? The first thing you should do, check your syllabus, find out what's going to happen for the next class, and do your best to try and understand it. Inevitably, you will not understand all of that material. That's why you go to class. But you still are supposed to be trying to do your best. You get in there, you read it, take some notes. If you're confused, go and see the tutor before lecture. Tell them I have a lecture coming up on Tuesday, but I really don't understand this at all, okay? That is the only way I know of to slow down lecture at all, okay? In all of this 6 years of doing this, I've never heard any faster way or better way to take lecture notes. It's difficult. The way to slow down lecture is with good reading notes, okay? And that's the way the study cycle is going, or the study schedule is asking you to do. Also, if you are given PowerPoints and things like that, use that stuff to get prepared. Do not wait till day of, okay? So if you're in any of your classes, you feel like you're behind, sometimes you guys are just like, these guys don't teach, but you don't realize that you need to meet them halfway. This is their expectation. It's not your fault if nobody shared it with you. Then how are you supposed to know? Okay. So now we have a poll question. When I started studying for a test, I A, look over the syllabus and create a new study plan. All the topics to review all the topics we covered. B, complete the review, go over old test quizzes and homework. C, attend a tutoring session and get help with topics I'm still struggling to understand. D, meet with my study group to review. Or E, ask questions during class or office hours to get an idea about the format of the test, clarification on any topics I still don't understand. What do you guys think is the correct course of action here?
Probably all of it.
Anybody else? Anybody want to, anything in the chat? If you feel like all of it, argue. Tell me why.
We have an E in the chat.
With full-time jobs and kids, how do you do that? Excellent question. That's an excellent question, friend. All right, I'm gonna let you off the hook on this one, right? Because a lot of you guys are looking at it and you're like, man, all of that junk. Yeah, it's true. All of this stuff. You should be doing all of this stuff. Okay. Look, let's go back really quickly. In all of these years, this is the thing. This is where I usually get the full-time job, right? Because you look at this kid and he works a part-time job at night. All right, my friend, you are here working a full-time job, and you're having to go to school essentially on the side in a read but don't remember land. Look, come in and talk to us, because like it's all of this finagling, like we were saying, that happens in the black. That's like all of your time almost is black. And so there's a lot of finagling and planning and things like that that go into getting this done. I can guarantee you, friend, that like our point of view on this is very different from yours. And that's just because we're getting paid to do this. Like, how do you do it with a full-time job? It can be done. come in and see us. And kids, it can be done. It's not easy, but it can be done. Make an appointment with one of us so we can get in there, and we'll go in there week to week and try to go over the nuts and bolts to help you execute, because it is not easy. Okay. And what seems intuitive oftentimes is just not, it's just not the way our brains work. Because like we look at this on Friday once again, and our inclination is to work until we finish something. But there's so much data that says every 45 minutes, you're better off stopping what you're doing and starting something new, which is really counterintuitive. But it turns out, like in couples therapy, they tell you the same thing. You shouldn't be talking to your significant other for longer than 45 minutes about anything really important. And I timed that mess once, and we started fighting at 45 minutes. So, I mean, I think we just get fatigued, even though we might not feel it. At 45 minutes, we get fatigued. Also, like doing all your work like that, if you do all your math, it's a great way to get all of your math work done, but not remember how you did any of it. So that's why, how do you do it with full-time job and kids? Come in and see us, man, so we can teach you every wrinkle and wiggle that we know. Because in order for you to do it to the extent that you want to, that's what it is. It's a bunch of wiggling, and it's a bunch of decision making from week to week. But it can be done. Okay. So through all of that, now let's start talking about reviewing for the test. Kels?
Yep. All right. Well, so on that poll question, we did put all of those in there. Technically, all of those are best practices for reviewing. So none of those are wrong. If you do all of them, great. If you do some of them, great. If you only do one or two that work for you, that's great. Those are just all best practices that we encourage all of our students to use. All right, so let's go ahead and talk about creating a review. I believe that's the next slide. All right, so we, as academic coaches, really promote the self-test method. This is actually shown to be the most effective method. And so we really encourage you guys to use this. And let's kind of break it down for you just so that you kind of understand how to create your own self-test. So step one, you're going to combine your lecture and reading notes. Joe mentioned that, you should be taking reading and lecture notes. So sitting down and reviewing all of that information. If you have a review or you have a study guide, great. If not, pull out your syllabus, make a list of topics. You guys are given all of the information that you need. So it's really important for you guys to utilize it. So you're gonna sit down, you're gonna go through that information. Where's there overlap? What did a professor really emphasize something? Am I still unsure about some areas? What are the differences? What are the similarities? You guys have chapter summaries, you have notes, you have all kinds of information available to you guys to kind of utilize. And then another really great thing to start thinking about is looking at your old test quizzes and homeworks. A lot of times our professors tend to use a similar pattern. They try to make the tests look very similar. So reviewing for past mistakes, looking at past types of questions is really important. And that's another piece of the puzzle that you guys need to kind of figure out when you're starting to prepare. So you've combined all this information. Next step is to fill in any gaps. So this is where you guys kind of sift through, look through that information. What do you know well? What do you not know well? What do you need to do to get that information? So you guys, there are a lot of really great resources available to you guys at ACC. Joe mentioned you can meet with a tutor. You have your professor's office hours. You have study groups. Any type of place that you can find this information is a great resource to use. Your textbook, anything that you guys can use to improve your knowledge, to fill in those gaps, is really going to help you prepare for the next step. So step 3 is actually the self-test aspect. So a lot of times you guys have a study guide, you have a review, and so that's great, but you really want to translate that into some form of self-test. So creating your own self-test is the most effective way. We have a lot of tools like the 2-column notes, like using Quizlet, flashcards, anything like that is going to help you prepared. And then the best way to really, really, really stick that information is read it out loud or write it down. Studies have shown if you just say it in your head, it's not as effective as storing it in long-term memory. So literally saying it out loud, having somebody quiz you, writing it down in an answer format, anything like that is really going to be helpful, and it's going to help you avoid this recognition, not recall trap. So we've all fallen into this. We've seen something on a test. We're like, yeah, I know that. And you recognize that you can literally point it out on a certain part of the page, and you can go, oh, and it's right by this information, but you cannot remember the answer. Yeah. And so that is where we all fall into this recognition, not recall. And so we, at that point, have not actually stored that into long-term memory.
Yeah, I think one quick shortcut, if Kelly, if I may.
Yeah.
One quick shortcut on that one is to take these ideas, and like when you're making your flashcards and stuff like that, or whenever you're consolidating these ideas, somewhere write them down in your own words. If you cannot take these ideas and rewrite them into your own words, you probably don't really understand it, right? That's at the moment that most of us understand things. We say, oh, okay, so let me get this straight. That's blah, 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 blah. But we never record that anywhere. And if you can't, that's blah, 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 blah. You probably don't really understand it. If you can't explain it to somebody else, you don't really understand it. And then one thing I was just thought of too is in step 2, filling in the gaps, guys, be careful of using the interwebs. Because, man, I'm telling you now, for some subjects, it can be the kiss of death. If you try to use it for history, you're liable to get 2 different histories. All right? You're liable to get, because if you take history from Kelly and you take history from me, you're not taking the exact same course. We don't agree on every single thing in history that ever happened. So when you're filling in those gaps, look to the resources that you were given first. Because I've seen you guys bring in a lot of extra junk, and sometimes it's wrong. It's not wrong. It's just not the information your professor wants, and then sometimes it just takes you a whole bunch of extra time to go through all the new stuff.
Yep. All right. So let's go ahead, and so we've created our self-test, and so we're going to talk about this, and you know how we talked about how many days before a test should you start reviewing. We had the 5, 7, 3. Everybody had a different answer. Ideally, we want to start setting 7 days, but we have this preparing for finals and the 5-day method. And so if you do have time to use that 7-day, we do encourage you to filter some of those extra days in here. But if you only have the 5 days, since we do know finals are coming up, let's kind of break this down really quick. It really does still follow kind of that self-test reviewing method. So day 1 is you're going to get organized, right? You are here to pull all that information. You have the syllabus, you have a review, you have a study guide. And if you don't, as we said, make a list of all the topics. Find all of your old notes. Some of us are guilty of taking notes, shoving them in our backpack, and never looking at them again. Pulling those out, pulling out quizzes, pulling out homeworks, rereading chapter summaries, really refamiliarizing yourself with that information. Step 2 is create. So it's always, as Joe said, in your own words is the best way. So pull that information, start writing it down in your own words, start answering some of those study guide questions. If you want to create flashcards, if you want to create 2-column notes, if you want to create anything, here's the section. Next section, condense. As Joe said, consolidate. Start consolidating into trigger words, words that make sense to you, words that will really kind of bring that information home. So if you are, and other students like to draw pictures, anything that's going to jog your memory is something that you want to do. Okay, step 4, brainstorm, or day 4, we're brainstorming. Here's where you're actually, you've written down all the answers to the study guide, you've consolidated. Now here's where you kind of get in your professor's head and you start creating questions. What might that professor ask? You guys know at this point, you've been in the class for the whole semester, you know what they're going to ask you. You know what kind of questions they like to ask you. So create questions that are similar to that. The more you can simulate a test, the more likely you are to remember that information. And then day 5, so if you do have a couple extra days, spend some time in, day 4, day 3, put a little extra here, a little extra there. And then day 5 is review. So this is the day before the test. You want to do a quick review. Go back through that stuff that you cannot remember. The easiest way to look at something is to look at it before you go to sleep. Studies show that memory does form after you go to sleep. So looking at something at the end of the day before you go to bed does help consolidate that memory. And as Joe said, that 45-minute rule, look, this is important. You want to work on it for 45 minutes, take a break, flip to a new subject. There are so many studies that show that you just cannot store information after that 45-minute. So definitely spread out that studying throughout the day. If you do have multiple classes, spread it out between the multiple classes so you guys can create a good study schedule to prepare for finals.
Yeah, full disclosure, guys, I got an ADD diagnosis when I was 19, and that's how I did it, right? Nobody taught me to do that. Like, my rule was, wait, what does that say, right? So if I'm reading something and I wait, what does that say 3 times? Wait, what does that say? Wait, what does that say? Wait, what did that say? By that 3rd time, I'm fighting, and it really doesn't matter what's going on. Even if it's before that 45 minutes. If you catch yourself fighting with the material, you're probably not going to remember it anyway. And then so what I did is when I would hit that, wait, what did that say? I would just switch to another topic. And then you saw the schedule earlier, and the schedule looks a lot like that. All of this stuff Kelly's telling you, no, these aren't tricks. These are the way that you retain it. You retain and recall information. Okay. The truth is, like, the more dirty your mnemonic device is, the more you are to remember it. Proof of that is they taught us one for obsequious in one of these things. I'm not going to say what it was because I just don't have the fortitude to be able to do that. These guys just told us it. You probably are half figuring it out, but still, that was 3 years ago, and I still remember it to this day. It worked. Yep. These are not cheating. These aren't tricks. Whatever you can do to score these points, they all count.
Yep. All right. So let's move on. So we've finished phase 1, as Joe said. It's the most time-consuming phase, right? We have spent all of our time leading up to it. Now you're in the hot seat. It is test time. So let's go ahead and do another poll question. And if anybody wants to shout out an answer or type a chat, which type of question do you struggle with the most? Multiple choice, true, false, matching, fill in the blank, short answer, essay. And so guys, we have all 4 of these covered, but depending on what students want to talk about, based on time constraints, we can kind of filter through and really think about test taking strategies for each one of these.
Yeah, this is a good time too if there's anything that passed and that has passed up until now and you're confused. And I mean, everybody's going to answer something. It's which ones bother you the most. So don't, you know what I mean? Yeah. No one's going to judge you.
It's all of them. It's all of them. Feel free to tell us that too.
Yeah, nobody's going to judge you, man. Like, you know, we're going to touch on it in a little bit, but they're tests for a reason. Like, everybody thinks they have test anxiety, but I always say, if you're worried about having test anxiety, don't worry about it. You probably don't, because that's the whole point, right? Is it's worrying. Everybody gets anxious on test day, man. So, like, nobody's here to judge you. And while our brains work the majority of the same, we're not all exactly the same. Okay. Nobody is actually the data.
Yeah. So we got a good mix of everything. So depending on time constraints, because I definitely want to make sure that we get into the third part of this too. But let's go ahead, and we got a few. So let's just do some basic practices, like best practices for any test. These are just some tips that are important to remember. So guys, getting to your test early. If you are in person, when we do go back, getting there a few minutes early. Actually sitting in the same seat that you sit in class does help. You know, if you are online, getting to the computer a few minutes early, logging in, making sure that you have your browser set up, you have everything good to go. You know, you really don't want to waste any of those minutes trying to get situated before the class starts. Because as soon as that test starts, that clock is ticking, right? So read all of directions and questions carefully. You know, you never know what might pop out at you. It might help jog information, or you can misread an instruction and miss the whole test. So definitely take a few minutes to make sure that you understand what you're doing.
Don't rush.
Yeah. If you have any kind of techniques like we talked about, reviewing that information right before the test, it's called a memory dump. Reviewing it, putting that information aside, and then actually literally writing it down, so it's out of your memory. You've kept it in short-term memory. We can store it for a little bit of time, and then it's there, and you don't have to worry about trying to recall that. Know the test. Be aware of what's on it. If the professor, you always can ask, is this going to be a multiple choice, short answer? The less anxiety you have about, the unknown, the better. So, know what's going to be on the test. Look for answers, guys. Sometimes you have a very long test, and it's important to go ahead and answer the ones that because sometimes we get stuck on problems. And if we get stuck on it and we sit there and we just keep thinking and thinking and thinking, we're wasting time. So look for the ones first. They might help jog your memory. And then if you do get stuck, skip it and come back. Always be aware of your time, guys, and then review. So always kind of give yourself maybe 5 minutes at the end of the test just to do a quick skim. To make sure that you're kind of aware of everything that you covered, if there's anything that you want to double check. So let's go ahead and talk about.
Well, really quickly before we leave this slide, I just want to say, guys, if you do sit down and you get like a super long test that you were not expecting or something like that, look, first thing you need to think is this. All right, I got 100 questions. They're all 1 point apiece. Or whatever, right? So it's mad long, but the more questions that are on there, that's actually in your favor outside of time constraints. You know what I'm saying? Other than that, make sure that you go through the entire thing, all right? First thing is don't freak out. It's probably in your favor. The second thing is go through the entire thing. Make sure you know how much each section is worth, okay? And make sure that you find all the ones that you know. If it's really long, find all the ones you know.
Okay, so let's see. Let's go ahead and we had some questions about multiple choice and the short answer.
Yeah, guys. And if you have any specific stuff, chat us because this group's not super big.
Yeah. So let's go ahead and go to the next slide. Okay, so multiple choice. We can go through the stuff and then maybe go through a couple of the questions that we have. So multiple choice, guys. Always, always, always try to answer the question without looking at the choices. That really does help. A lot of times we second guess ourselves when we read choices. So look at those first. Look for ones that are completely wrong. Go ahead and eliminate stuff. It's really important to make that, if you do have to guess, make it a lot smaller. Make it a 50-50 guess as opposed to a 1 in 25. So eliminate answers. Sometimes, guys, and we all do this, professors can, write questions. A lot of times there is some form of the answer or something that might jog your memory in another question. So it's okay to skip it and come back because something might jog your memory. And then always, always, always make an educated guess. So let's go ahead and do a quick.
Yeah, if I could add one to this thing, I would say don't what if all the choices to death either. Okay? Your first inclination is well, the data says your first inclination, barring just a straight up guess, is your best chance to answer it correctly. So if you think something is the right answer, you're not completely sure why. You know what I mean? And the first thing you should have done is what Kelly told you to do is answer it yourself and then look for the one that best matches. But don't sit there and keep what ifing all of the answer choices to death. Okay? It's a borderline game. Answer the best one and then run. That's what I do.
Yes. So here's just a sample multiple choice question. If anybody wants to take a shot at the answer, this is based on knowledge from our part 1. So which of the following is an example of distributed practice? Does anybody have a guess?
Good question.
And we didn't really talk about this, but it was kind of implied. So we'll see if anybody.
Do your best. Yeah, do your best. This is like an A-level question. Yeah, this is a good question.
Kelly, this is kind of a good example. Is if you didn't know the answer, you could definitely get some clues from the question itself.
Yep,
Right.
exactly.
Exactly. This is good, Kelly. Guys, that's why Kelly put pretty much this whole thing together. So like, I just wanted to make sure everybody knew that.
All right. Anybody want to tell us their answer and why?
Take a stab. I wish I had participation points.
I think they all seem to be, at least in the way you'd want to manage your time.
Okay.
To me, none of them seem wrong. That's for sure.
Okay. So the question specifically is, which of the following is an example of the time management principle of distributive practice? Does anybody, okay, does anybody know, like, what is distributive practice? Anybody want to know specifically what distributive practice is? Yeah.
I mean, based on the word, it means to spread out your time and
Nice, exactly. That's exactly what it means.
So if you look at A says 9 hours, so you're spreading out 9 hours a week for his math. Sam spreads 9 hours of study time for English.
Does it say that Joe is spreading 9 hours?
He studies 9 hours a week. So
okay. It's on the week. Okay.
Well, that's spreading out hours in a week.
Is it? But then what's the difference between A and B?
Well, I mean, Sam is spreading out his 9 hour of study time throughout the week. Joe's studying 9 hours a week. He's still taking a few hours a day in a week.
All right. Full disclosure, I don't know what the correct answer is, but I would eliminate A.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, as we're doing this together, I would eliminate A.
Yeah.
Because it specifically says that Sam spreads. It does not say that I spread. I could be doing that in 2 days. I could be doing 4.5 hours in 2 days. Or I could be doing 9 hours in 1 day.
Yeah, Joe could spend his whole Saturday doing math homework.
Mm-hmm. But it says Sam spreads. So I would eliminate A. That's what I would do. I don't know what the answer is yet, but me, I would eliminate A. Yep. And I do not know what the answer is.
Well, you are on the right track, Joe. So that's another good point to talk about when you're talking about, answering a multiple choice question. Looking, defining what the word distributed practice is, you said spreading it out. So looking for those cues that are going to help you answer that question. So that Joe hit it right on the head.
Yeah, you guys did a great job with that because that was y'all's word. To spread it out was y'all's word. So, good job. Let's see. Wait, so what was the answer?
B.
B, right? Yeah.
Yep, you're correct.
Good question, Kelly. Does that answer everybody's questions? Anybody want to talk about multiple choice anymore, dog? Because it's a thing. Multiple choice is a thing. I have learned is that other countries are not as dependent on the multiple choice question as we are. And they come here and for lack of a better, it seems to be gendered. You know what I'm saying? In my experience, I was never prepared for stuff, right? So if it was multiple choice, I went in there like, hell yeah, answers are somewhere. So I would do what we just did. And I answered a lot of questions just like that, not knowing what in the world was going on, but saying, okay, I'm distributive practice, that's spreading stuff out. Sam spreads, no one else is doing that. I guess that's the answer. Okay. So I was excited by that. Then I found out there were a whole bunch of people that hated it. This girl came from Australia. She was a history major, and she was irate because she didn't agree completely with any of the answers, especially in history, but could not express herself.
Yeah.
So she kept on going. But in this case, this could be true. In this case, that could be true.
Yeah.
So there is a game to it, guys.
On that same vein, there is one answer that is the most right. So sometimes, as you said, there's not one that's like hits everything, but it's the most right, and that's the one that you want to go
right. Yeah, and that's why I was saying earlier, guys. That's usually how it goes. It's like that one's the most right, Do not sit here and keep on trying to go around in circles why it's the most right. If you're not sure why you think that, I'm gonna be honest with you. By the time I answered B, I run from these things. Like, I don't answer and keep reading. I may read again when I go back and check after doing the whole test, but at the time of answering, I do not keep reading the rest of the answer choices.
No. All right. So thanks for participating, everybody. Good discussion. So let's see. We didn't really get too many questions about true false. So I guess one thing just to really be aware of with true false, be aware of those absolute words. So always, only, except, anything like that, odds on are they're trying to get you to notice that. And so if it's something, probably it's going to be false, but you never know, or if it is true. And then the other thing to think about, if any part of the statement is false, it is going to be false, right? So sometimes the professors do conjoin two ideas, and then part of it's true, part of it's false. The answer is always false, right? Okay, so let's go ahead and skip to the matching, because we did have a question about matching. Okay, so with matching, fill in the blank, guys. This is going to be another one where you definitely want to read the directions closely. You want to make sure if it is something that maybe you could use a choice more than once, or you are not using all of them, or sometimes, the professor is trying to trick you or anything like that. And again, it's always one of those fill in the blank, try to answer it without looking for the choice. So that's kind of the best way to kind of go about this. And then always, if you have an actual paper and pencil test, mark the ones off that you've used, or put a little tally by it if you are able to use it more than once. Just be aware of that. And then if you are taking an online test, just make sure that you are skimming just to kind of keep track of, if you can only use it once and you've used it, is there a better option for you to kind of go through there. So we have
I always hated fill in the blank with no bank.
Yes.
That's the very most difficult kind of test to take, when it's just.
And at that point, it's almost a short answer, right?
Yeah, well,
usually implies that there's some kind of.
Dude, I would sit down the test and see that, and my heart would drop.
Yeah.
Like, I'd be like, "Oh Lord, here comes a 50." Like, man.
So yeah. So here's a sample, and it's kind of hard to do a matching practice while we're discussing, but this one is clearly if you look at it, there's only 3 choices in column A. So odds on are you're going to be using them more than once. And so this was a question with regards to creating that self-test review method. So there were 3 steps. And so really this broke down each step and which tag phrase goes with that step. So does anybody have any questions, just kind of skimming through this? Is there any of them that you are not sure of which answer from column A would go with column B?
Or you have questions about anything else?
Yeah.
And once again, thank you so much for participation. My man, we went back and forth over that question. You're a brave soul, man, and I hope you didn't feel like attacked or anything like that.
Yeah. Okay. So if anybody has any questions, go ahead and just pop them in the chat. And let's go over a short answer essay. I know that's the big one for a lot of our students. So that's the next one. The next slide, Joe.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, guys. Big one. A lot of times you guys have these kind of going back to that point that Joe had made. If you have a very long test, odds are that essay is going to be worth a lot of points. So maybe doing that part first.
That's what I would do. That's what I would do. Yep.
Yeah.
If it's, especially if it's worth the most points,
yeah.
I'm doing this first. You know why? Because if the other thing was multiple choice, I can guess. Or if it's true or false, like, I got a shot. So I can get the rest of this test done in 5 or 10 minutes. But if you leave yourself only 10, 15 minutes to do your essays, you're going to get killed. This is also, I loved essay questions. Why? Because I had a chance. I always had a chance to fight. Even if I didn't know the answer, if I could make up something cute enough and support it, like, I had a chance. I was still going to get special credit.
Yep.
You know what
So
I mean?
that's a good thing. That's a good point Joe made. Always write down something. You never know what you're going to get points for. Try to be very clear, concise. Try to be grammatically correct, guys. That does actually help. You know, your professors do understand that you're writing this in a time crunch, but you know, the neater, the clearer, the more grammatically correct you can be, the better. And then, you know, as we said, always, always, always write down something. You don't know that you won't get points for it. So as long as you take a stab at it, it's more important to put down something than leave an entire essay question blank.
Yeah, if I could take this moment too to speak on something that's really close to my heart, because I really am a big fan of essay questions. But one thing once I got this job, I found a lot of you guys, oftentimes you were given like 5, right? And they would say you're gonna have to answer 2 of these 5 essay questions. Like you guys, I found a lot of you were like writing out your whole answer and then trying to like go back and replicate that. And I'm just like, I just want to tell you guys, you need to trust yourself to answer the question on the spot. If you know the 5, if he gives you 5, pick the 4 most likely ones, or the 3 most likely ones you think he's going to answer. Maybe you outline it or whatever, but you know, don't sit there and write out your entire answer and then try to duplicate your whole answer. Okay, because I mean, you'll end up doing that for 5 questions, and he's only going to ask you 2, and then you might not have picked the right ones to put the most of your effort in, and everything else.
Part 3 of this presentation, guys, is going to be about test anxiety. And as Joe said, we are all nervous before a test. So I'm just going to, while Joe's reconnecting, I'm just going to read you the poll question. So when I hear the word test anxiety, I think it is, and then answer choice A is nervousness before a test. Answer choice B is going completely blank while taking the test. Answer choice C is knowing the information when I'm studying, but not getting the test result that I thought I should get. Answer choice C is having an intense sense of panic while I'm taking the test. And answer choice E will be having a loss of focus or concentration while I'm taking the test. And so if anybody has, go ahead and just put them in the chat for us, A, B, C, D, or E.
And if you want to repeat those or anything, just, you know.
Yeah, more than happy.
Yeah, we understand this is difficult. I'm rebooting.
Do you want me to share it, Joe?
You can try.
Okay, let me see if I can get it to pull up on mine end.
Oh, do you really, Maria? Maria, I would like to talk to you about that. If that's, because I always say at this juncture that in 6 years, I've only really seen 2 real cases of test anxiety. The first young lady, we told her to close her eyes and imagine that she was answering B, and she teared up. Okay. The second one, I told a young lady that story, and she started vibrating. Okay. My favorite thing to say, oh, I'm about to beat you, Kelly. My favorite thing to say is that if you're worried about it, like, don't, because that's what it is, right? It's worry. And worry about worry has never gotten anyone anywhere. My boss found a story a couple of years ago where they took some people, they followed them for 20 some odd years of their life or whatever it is. And they asked them at the beginning of the study, they said, how do you feel about anxiety? The group that was really worried about anxiety just died early. And that's the end of the story, okay? The point of all of that is to say that, she laughed. The point of all of that is it is funny, in a dark kind of way, that anxiety is part of life, and that it's learning to deal with it. No one has an anxiety-free life, okay? When you go in there to test day, you should be anxious. It's a test, for crying out loud. And it's one of the more important things you've ever done in your life, right? No great performer has ever given their very best performance without butterflies. I was gonna say, I used to do slam poetry, right? The best score I ever saw out of anybody, I actually scored 99.8 out of 100, and I was scared to death. Okay, it was the first time I ever had delivered that piece. I was vibrating, guys, and I'll tell you, vibrating, I mean vibrating. And, you know, I gave the very best performance I had ever given.
Yeah.
So it's just to say that, you know, just because you're feeling something, that doesn't mean it's bad.
Do actually increase adrenaline production. All of that does actually help with focus and attention during a test. So nervousness is normal. When it becomes so severe that you're having physical or emotional symptoms, like Joe said, the person was vibrating and the other students began crying. That is an example of when nervousness turns into test anxiety. And so you guys, there are a lot of really great resources that are available to you guys at ACC to connect with somebody to kind of work through these situations. But to kind of combat that just nervousness, maybe going a little bit of blank during a test, a lot of times we do understand that this does come from lack of preparation or some other areas. So a couple quick strategies to kind of help you guys. First off, number one, avoid cramming. So when you guys start preparing a day before or 2 days before, that nervousness, that like, oh my gosh, did I actually study everything? Do I remember everything? That does translate into during the test, right? That does cause anxiety. Next thing, know the test. Eliminate the unknown, guys. Don't be afraid to ask your professor what's going to be on the test. Sometimes they give you a review. Sometimes they give you an example. Some are very open, like it's going to be 50 questions. They're going to be 30 multiple choice. So the more you guys can eliminate that unknown, the better. You know, definitely take the time to take care of yourself. Getting a good night's sleep, eating before the test, exercise. Guys, exercising while before and after studying does help. Sleep, guys, it is important. That's when we consolidate memories. So all of that time that you guys can spend leading up to the test, doing different things like this, and then right before the test, you know, if you walk to class, doing a little bit of exercise, anything like that is going to help you. Definitely take the time to, during the test. So we've kind of taken some time before the test, we're leading up to it. When we get into the test, you know, if you do feel like you're starting to panic, there are a couple techniques that you guys can use. First thing, journal. Sometimes writing down everything that you're nervous about or that you're concerned about before the test, right before, and then just putting it away, getting it out of your mind. Sometimes that does help kind of clear yourself, kind of recenter and focus. The technique that we talked about, the memory dump. So stuff that you are struggling to remember, look at it right before the test. You can store stuff in short-term memory for 30 seconds to 2 minutes. So if you can look at it right before the test, jot it down, you're good to go. Breathing exercises. If you do feel like you're starting to panic during a test, close your eyes, take a few deep breaths, take a step back, and just kind of recenter yourself. And then avoid negative self-talk, guys. This is one of the big things. When we tell ourselves we can't, it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. It's really important to be your own cheerleader. You have to encourage yourself. You just keep reminding yourself, you know this, you can do this. It's really important. And then the best thing that you guys can do if you do feel like this is all coming to a head, you've prepared plenty of time in advance. You've slept. You've practiced the test. You're familiar with it. You've done all these things that you can do to prepare, and you're still having these moments. Seek help. As we said, there's a lot of great resources available to you guys on campus. There's counseling, academic coaches. We can help you create that study plan. Maybe you do need help strategizing. Your tutors are here if you are struggling with answering some questions. They are the person that can help you fill in those gaps. Your professor, they're a great person. You know, yes, their job is to test you and to determine if you're learning, but they're here to support you as well. So definitely take advantage of all the great resources that are available to you guys here at ACC. All right. Apologize that
Yeah, shut down, dude. You did it
cut
again.
off there. But we do have a really great resource that we will be emailing everybody after the presentation that has just a rundown of all the information. It has a lot of really great links to resources that we have available that we've actually put together for you guys that are available on our website. So anybody have any final thoughts, any final questions that we didn't answer? We got a few minutes if anybody wants to jump in, unmute, and just chat, ask questions. Let's see.
Man, that was good though, guys. Is it is there anything anybody like has any questions? Anything you want to share about what you learned? Anything like that? Anything you just don't believe that you heard?
Yeah.
Just sounds false.
Yeah.
I have
Did we answer?
I have found that taking a break, like I can't, if I'm like studying before my test, I can't, even if it's not during a long period of time, I can't study straight up to it because then by the time I'm taking my test, I'm brain dead. So I have to like take a break, do something completely different right before I take a test. Yeah.
Ma'am, I can't study the material the same day.
Oh.
Like I will not, and as I said, not everyone should. I will not study that material the day of. I will not. I want the first time I thought about it to be when I sit down to test. I want my first thoughts about it all day long to be when I start testing. So I do the exact, you said in that break or whatever, then I do that for as many hours as possible. Whatever activity that is that I'm going to do for break, then I start doing that like the night before, and I'll just try to do that until forever and be like, oh yeah, and then sit down, and then try, but you got to really like trust yourself. And that's why I wanted to tell you guys, trust yourself to be able to answer on the spot, especially those essay questions. But there definitely comes a point where you have to just trust yourself to be able to perform, but you probably will.
So what if you just are a bad test taker?
I mean, I just feel like it's kind of one of those things where there's not even no point in doing that. You know what I'm saying? Because you're going to have to take it. You know what I'm saying? So, like, come in, talk to us, come in and talk to me if you want and tell me exactly what that means. Because, look, and all of this time, I didn't really get to finish, but in all this time, most of the people I sit down, I say, what are you here for? They say test anxiety. And then I say, okay, well, let's see how you're preparing. Are you doing this? Are you doing that? Are you doing this? Are you doing that? Are you doing this? Are you doing that? And they're like, no, I'm not doing any of that. And I'm like, you know what? Go do that stuff and then come back and tell me how you feel. So I would tell you the same thing. Like you over there, you have decided that you're a bad test taker. Let us decide what kind of test taker you are. So I guarantee you, when you leave me, you're going to be the best test taker you can possibly be. And it's not going to be no bad test taker. Because trust. Like, guys, I'm telling you, the basket of junk at the beginning.
Well, I'll say, Anna asked the question, but honestly, I've always been a bad test taker, and I'd study. But I'm 47 years old, Joseph. I just got back into school, and back then, maybe I was a bad preparer. I went to truck driving school at 25. I was the best in the class, and the professor asked me, do the rodeo test because he's the best taker, the best driver out there.
Yeah.
I almost failed, and I was the best one.
So, okay.
And it's because I got nervous. And I don't know if the definition of a bad test taker is because someone didn't prepare. And I think I have test anxiety. I get physical symptoms.
Okay. So look, full disclosure, Gary, the reason I do that to try to minimize, right? Because like if I could convince somebody that they don't have test anxiety, they probably are going to get over it, right? So I say that because, yeah, I know I just don't like to label stuff, right? You know what I'm saying? So my thing is like, let's get to work. And then if I can trick you into thinking it's not a problem anymore, then I won it, whether or not we solved it, right? But the reality is like, yes, you're right. A lot of different things go on in our brains, man, at that moment. You know what I'm saying? Like we react differently to these brain chemicals. And that's the thing. Like sometimes some of us, like that adrenaline, those fight or flight chemicals kick in, and like I might look and sound crazy, but then when I get done, you're gonna be like, wow. You know what I'm saying? It's be like a big burst of blam, and you're gonna be like, oh, that's just the way that I am. Everybody doesn't operate that way. When that kicks in, and all that energy and everything else, depending on what wavelength you are, you got to find a way to channel it.
Let me ask y'all a question.
Yeah.
So. The severity or the seriousness of the test, right?
Yeah.
It's pretty important, and that's what triggers any of this adrenaline.
Right. What's your perception of that importance?
Well, so here's my question. So to, just like anything you practice something, you get better at it,
Yeah.
and it minimizes that
Yeah.
that anxiety, because you're still
Yeah.
going to have anxiety, whether
Yeah.
it's just
Yeah. Yeah.
nervousness, whatever. But is there a way to legitimately take a test that is serious as a practice test? You trick yourself into say, this is just a practice exam, but how do I recreate the nervousness that I have during?
I think it's the opposite. Because if you do that, if what you're trying to do is practice being nervous.
Sure.
What you want to do is take this is just a practice test to the test. If you're on the free throw line, you do not sit there and think, wow, my entire life is going to culminate in this one free throw. You know what I'm saying? Every free throw I've shot, and if I miss this, nothing matters. This is my only chance to win a championship. And you do the exact opposite.
No pressure.
Yeah, you walk up to that thing and you say, man, one more free throw. And so, like, when you're shooting free throws alone in the gym, you don't sit there and try to pretend. You just keep making them. And then when you're on the line under duress, you don't think about it. You just shoot. So it's the opposite. You'll never make that practice test as anxiety-inducing as the other test. The goal is to make the actual test less anxiety-inducing.
So try to come up with exams. I think that was part of the presentation, was talking about. I don't know what, I didn't write down the step. I took
what I was taught is this. Heather taught me, like my very first boss here taught me. She said, this is what we told the girl that cried. Okay. She said, look, you're going to go and you're going to practice. When you reach that point, you're going to stop and you're going to come back and you're going to start again. Because she was what that does is train you to be nervous. So if you sit down and you're just like, yeah, whatever, and you take note of that. How did you do that? How did that feel? What things did you think, and what did you not think? You know what I'm saying? Take inventory of yourself when you're not nervous, and then carry that over. Because that's what I was going to tell you. I did the exact opposite. I knew how important that test was, but I told myself every single time, don't worry about it. Why? Because I wasn't prepared and I was scared. But like that wasn't going to help me perform. So I was always just like, you be all right, you be all right. And sometimes, yeah, I failed. You know what I'm saying? But the real truth is, like, I got my degree on time, and now I have a job teaching people to be better students than I was. So, I mean, I
practice tests are what you're saying. I don't know what step that was.
Yeah.
Well,
that self-test component is going to be your best bet, right?
That's what it was.
Simulating a test environment is really important. And then always looking back at your past mistakes. So, at this point, you've had how many tests? So, when you have that first test, you don't really know, right? You're walking in kind of blind. But every time after that, you're gathering that information, you're storing that. So you kind of at that point starting to determine patterns, figure out what works, what doesn't work. And as Joe said, kind of sit down and reflect, like what was I feeling during this test? Why did I feel that? Did I feel like I was more prepared? XYZ. And so just, all of those little pieces of information are going to help you. And it's always, personalized to you, because these are all just broad strategies. And then you have to really sit down and think about what works, what didn't work, and how it affects you.
Yeah. And then the last thing I've always told people, like, there does come a point where it's more than academic, right? You know what I'm saying? Like, I mean, it's a test, but it's there's something else. So it's just like what I used to tell people is like they would have really high anxiety, like that girl that vibrated and stuff. And I would tell her to practice on low stakes things. Like if you found yourself getting anxious about low stakes stuff, you know what I'm saying? Then practice like not. So there's that, but then it's like look for other things that you find yourself. You know what I mean? Like if you get anxious throwing darts, then maybe you should throw darts more often and see like what is that about? You know what I mean? And if you can get over your anxiety throwing darts, then maybe that will help you get over your anxiety on testing. Like managing and mitigating anxiety is like one. There's only one anxiety. You know what I mean? We give it a bunch of names, but the real truth, there's only really one. Gary, you there?
Nah, yeah.
Okay, there you go. Okay, good. No, I couldn't.
No, I appreciate it, Joe.
You're blinking in and out. But dude, I mean, honestly, this is my least favorite and my favorite part of the job, because all of these soft skills are annoying, but it's definitely the most interesting part. You know what I'm saying? Like, I like the fact that you pushed me to the point of like, dude, well, and it's just like, okay, well, yeah, you made me talk about it, and yeah, I mean, you're not wrong, dude, and it is complicated. But you know,
Yeah.
I'm always down to talk about it. If you want to, if you want to set an appointment sometime or whatever.
I would, yeah. That I know we're almost done.